The Valkorian throne room stretched before me like a cathedral of arrogance, all gleaming obsidian and floating luminescent spheres that pulsed with the heartbeat of a dying star. I, Ambassador Kelrix of the 3rd Diplomatic Corps, stood with my tentacles coiled in what I hoped passed for confident anticipation. 23 cycles I'd served the Galactic Council, 23 cycles of negotiating trade disputes, territorial squabbles, and the occasional territorial trade dispute squabble hybrid that made my translator implant want to self-destruct. Nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for this mess. King Vorzeth, the merciless, sat upon his throne, a mountain of scales and bad decisions wrapped in ceremonial armor that probably cost more than my entire planet's GDP. His 6 eyes tracked the human woman walking across his court like a predator, watching something it couldn't quite decide whether to eat or fear. The smart money, I thought grimly, should have been on fear. But Vorzath wasn't smart. He was a king, which in my experience meant he'd confused birth lottery winnings with actual competence. So Vorzath rumbled, his voice like continents grinding together during a particularly aggressive geological event. The humans send a single female to negotiate the Outer Rim territories. How quaint. The woman, who'd introduced herself simply as Maya Volkov, smiled. Not the diplomatic smile I'd practiced for years in front of mirror equivalents. No, this was the smile of someone who knew a punchline the rest of the room hadn't heard yet. She wore a simple black suit that somehow made every elaborate outfit in the room look like costume jewelry, and her hair was pulled back in a manner that suggested she had more important things to worry about than impressing overgrown lizards with delusions of adequacy. "Your Majesty is too kind," she said, her voice carrying that particular human quality of politeness that could mean anything from genuine gratitude to "I'm about to ruin your entire week. I assure you I'm more than sufficient for our purposes here." I shifted uncomfortably. The briefing documents about humans had been disturbing. They came from a Class 12 death world, which meant their planet actively tried to kill them approximately 16 hours per rotation. They'd evolved from persistence predators, could function on catastrophically little sleep, and had a disturbing tendency to befriend things that should eat them or adopt warfare strategies that made our military analysts require therapy. But the really concerning part, the whispers, the stories that circulated through back-channel communications about human operatives who specialized in problems of the permanent variety. The humans had a name for these ghosts, borrowed from their ancient folklore. Baba Yaga. Vorzath leaned forward, his throne groaning under the shift in weight. "Sufficient, child. I have conquered 47 systems. I have made warlords weep and civilizations kneel. You stand before me with empty hands and expect what?" "Exactly. I expect," Maya said, examining her fingernails with the interest one might show paint drying, "that we can reach an agreement about the Outer Rim territories without anyone doing anything they'll regret. The Council's proposal is generous, Your Majesty. 20% tariff reduction, free trade zones and guaranteed shipping routes. Everyone wins, everyone profits, and nobody has to file incident reports that'll take weeks to complete." I appreciated her optimism. I also appreciated sunsets and the sound of rainfall, but neither would stop a megalomaniac king from making catastrophically poor choices. "The Council's proposal," Vorzath said, and oh stars, his crest was flaring, which meant his blood pressure was rising, which meant terrible decisions were incoming like meteors, "is an insult. The Outer Rim belongs to the Valkorian Empire by right of conquest. I will not negotiate with bureaucrats and their pet humans about what is already mine." He stood all 9 feet of him, and I swear the temperature dropped 3 degrees. His honor guard, 8 of the most heavily armed soldiers I'd ever seen, stepped forward in perfect synchronization. Their plasma rifles hummed with charging energy, and I briefly wondered if my life insurance covered vaporized while watching diplomatic incidents spiral into war crime. "In fact," Vorzath continued, descending the throne steps with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences, "I grow tired of the Council's interference. Perhaps sending them back a message written in human blood will clarify my position on these matters." He drew a ceremonial blade, except judging by the way it glowed and crackled with energy, it was about as ceremonial as a tactical nuclear weapon. The guards raised their rifles, targeting solutions probably already calculated by their combat implants. Maya didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't reach for a weapon, didn't even stop examining her nails. She just sighed. The way my spawning unit used to sigh when I'd knock over the phosphorescent plants as a juvenile. "Your Majesty," she said, and her voice had changed just slightly, gone from professional diplomat to something else entirely, something that made my survival instincts scream in frequencies I didn't know I could hear. "I really wish you hadn't done that." "You wish?" Vorzeth laughed, a sound like an avalanche having a nervous breakdown. "You wish? You stand alone, human, surrounded by my finest soldiers before a king who has ended civilizations. Your wishes are as meaningless as your species' diplomatic pretensions. Alone?" Maya looked up then, finally, and her eyes, stars preserve me, her eyes were the eyes of something ancient and patient, and absolutely done with today's nonsense. "Your Majesty, I'm never alone." She moved. I've seen a lot of species move quickly. Thraxian pounce cats. Skurlaxian strike snakes. That one Terran martial arts demonstration that gave me nightmares for a month. None of it. Absolutely none of it. Compared to what happened next. Maya's hand blurred faster than my perception could track, and suddenly she wasn't where she'd been standing. The first guard's rifle went flying. His trigger tentacle bent at an angle that biology shouldn't allow. The second guard fired, but Maya was already moving, already spinning, and the plasma bolt hit the third guard square in the chest plate, sending him crashing backward into an ornamental pillar that had probably stood for centuries before today's property damage. Vorzeth swung his energy blade, a strike that should have bisected the human diplomat, but she ducked under it with room to spare, her hand shooting out to strike his wrist with a crack that echoed through the throne room. The blade clattered to the floor, still humming its deadly song. "Did you know?" Maya said conversationally, as she systematically dismantled the most elite military unit on Velcoria with the casual efficiency of someone filing paperwork, "that the council specifically sent me because they suspected you'd try something stupid. They have this whole psychological profile on you, Your Majesty. Very thorough. Lots of charts about impulse control issues and narcissistic tendencies." I told them, no, surely even Vorzeth isn't dumb enough to attack a council diplomat during peace negotiations. But here we are. Guard 5 tried to grab her from behind. She stepped aside, used his momentum to send him crashing into Guard 6, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs and wounded dignity. Guard 7 fired his sidearm, but Maya had somehow acquired one of the dropped rifles and used it to deflect the shot, which melted a very expensive-looking tapestry depicting what I assumed was Vorzeth's glorious conquest history. "See, the thing is," Maya continued, now holding 2 plasma rifles and demonstrating what humans call dual-wielding with distressing competence, "I actually liked the tapestry. It had nice color composition. Purple and gold, very regal. Now it's just slag. That's coming out of someone's budget, Your Majesty." Guard 8, apparently the smart one who'd been hanging back to assess the situation, dropped his weapon and raised his primary manipulators in surrender. Maya nodded approvingly at him. "Good choice. You get to keep your pension." Vorzeth, credit to his stubbornness if not his intelligence, grabbed another weapon from a fallen guard and aimed it at Maya's head. His crest was fully extended now, pulsing with rage colors that probably meant something significant in Velcorian body language. I was too busy trying not to pass out to consult my cultural database. "You dare," he hissed. "You dare lay hands on a sovereign king. The Velcorian fleet will reduce Earth to cosmic dust for this insult." Maya lowered the rifles, her expression shifting from combat ready to something far more terrifying, professional concern. "Your Majesty, please think carefully about your next move. Right now this is an unfortunate incident. Diplomatic channels can smooth this over. Reparations can be paid. Everyone can pretend this was a cultural misunderstanding about personal space boundaries. But if you pull that trigger, if you actually attack a council diplomat during official negotiations, well then it becomes something else entirely. I fear nothing from the council," Vorzeth spat, though his secondary eyes were doing that twitching thing that suggested his survival instincts were finally catching up to his ego. "And I certainly don't fear one human female with delusions of combat capability. That's the problem, Your Majesty. You should." Maya's voice went quiet, almost gentle, which somehow made it infinitely worse. "Do you know what they call me back home? Do you know why the council sends me to negotiations they expect to go badly? I did. Oh stars. I suddenly did. because the pieces were clicking together like a puzzle designed by a sadistic deity with a taste for irony. The calm competence, the absolute lack of fear, the way she'd dismantled 8 elite soldiers like someone clearing away empty meal containers. The stories I'd heard, dismissed as exaggeration about human operatives who could end problems permanently, efficiently, and with remarkably little paperwork afterward. "They call me Baba Yaga," Maya said. And the temperature actually dropped. I wasn't imagining it. Not because I'm some supernatural entity from human folklore, but because before I became a diplomat I was something else. Something the human government created during the Proxima conflicts, back when we were still figuring out how to interact with galactic civilization without accidentally terrifying everyone. She took a step forward. Vorzeth took a step back, king or not, primal recognition of predator finally overriding political arrogance. "I've ended 17 insurgencies, 3 attempted genocides, and one particularly awkward situation involving a space pirate who thought kidnapping a council member's offspring would be profitable. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. For him, the offspring was fine, bit traumatized, but therapy helped. The pirate, well, let's just say they never found enough pieces to confirm dental records." Another step forward. Another step back. The remaining conscious guards were very carefully not making eye contact with anyone, suddenly fascinated by ceiling architecture. "So here's what's going to happen, Your Majesty. You're going to lower that weapon. You're going to apologize to Ambassador Kelrix over there, who's having a very bad day and didn't ask to witness attempted regicide. Then you're going to sit down. We're going to finish these negotiations like civilized beings, and you're going to accept the Council's generous offer. Because the alternative is that I stop being a diplomat, and remember my old job description. You can't threaten a sovereign ruler," Vorzeth stammered. But the weapon was lowering, his manipulator shaking slightly. "The Galactic Council, they wouldn't. Diplomatic immunity. Rules of engagement." "Oh, Your Majesty." Maya smiled again. And this time there was nothing diplomatic about it. Just teeth and terrible promise. "Diplomatic immunity works both ways. I'm immune from your laws. You're not immune from mine. And my old employers, they have very flexible definitions of self-defense, especially when it comes to protecting council diplomats from murderous kings having temper tantrums." The weapon clattered to the floor. Vorzeth's crest deflated like a punctured atmospheric bladder, all the royal arrogance draining away to reveal what he'd always been underneath. A bully who'd never faced real consequences. A king who'd confused military might with personal competence. I apologize, Ambassador Kelrix," he managed, looking at me with eyes that had gone from predatory to something resembling actual awareness. This was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Cultural differences. Excessive pageantry. Clearly, we should negotiate properly." I unstuck my language processor from the roof of my speaking orifice. "Accepted, Your Majesty. Perhaps we could all sit down, review the Council's proposal with fresh perspective and significantly less attempted murder." The next 2 hours were the most surreal of my career. We sat in that throne room, stepping over unconscious guards and property damage, and negotiated the most favorable trade agreement the Council had secured in 5 cycles. Vorzeth agreed to everything. 20% tariff reduction, free trade zones, guaranteed shipping routes, and threw in mining rights to 3 asteroid fields I hadn't even been authorized to request. Maya took notes in a small datapad, occasionally suggesting modifications that somehow made the deal even better for the Council, her voice pleasant and professional, as if she hadn't just demonstrated why humans were simultaneously the best and most terrifying diplomatic option available. When we finally concluded, handshakes exchanged, digital signatures applied, Vorzeth's honor guard had regained consciousness and were very politely pretending nothing unusual had occurred. The smart guard, number 8, actually saluted Maya on her way out. We walked back to my shuttle in silence, my ambulatory appendages still slightly unstable from adrenaline overflow. Finally, as we reached the landing platform, I had to ask, was any of that true? The stories Baba Yaga, the Proxima conflicts. Maya paused at the shuttle entrance, looking back at the palace where Vorzeth was probably already spinning this into some face-saving narrative about strategic concessions. Does it matter, Ambassador? We got the agreement. Nobody died, and the Council achieved its objectives. Sometimes the threat of violence is more effective than violence itself. Sometimes perception matters more than reality. But the way you moved, the combat skills, that wasn't perception. She smiled. Warmer this time, almost human. I did 3 years of Krav Maga and competed in mixed martial arts tournaments during university. Turns out humans are naturally good at hitting things. Evolutionary advantage from our death world heritage. The rest, the reputation, the stories, those build on themselves. Humans understand the power of mythology. Ambassador, we've been scaring ourselves with stories since we learned to make fire. Turns out, it works on other species too. So you're not actually Baba Yaga? Baba Yaga isn't real, Ambassador. She's a fairy tale, a story to frighten children into good behavior. But sometimes, when dealing with children having tantrums, a good scary story is exactly what's needed. She paused, then added with that edge of humor I was learning to recognize as quintessentially human. Besides, the real Baba Yaga would have eaten him. I just bruised his ego and his guards. Much better outcome for everyone involved. As my shuttle lifted off, leaving Velcoria and its humbled king behind, I updated my report for the council with trembling manipulators. Mission success. Agreement secured. Recommend continued deployment of diplomatic specialist Maya Volkov for difficult negotiations. Then I added a personal note, classified for council eyes only. The humans understand something we don't about the relationship between reputation and reality, between story and truth. We should be very, very grateful they're on our side. Because if they ever decide otherwise, all our fleets and armies won't matter half as much as one human woman with a scary story and the skills to back it up. Baba Yaga might not be real, but Maya Volkov certainly was, and that I reflected as my shuttle jumped to faster than light, was infinitely more terrifying.